Greetings and salutations, my excellent friends. Welcome once more to Sunday. This is the Chi Ranger Adventures podcast. This is episode number 217. Wow. Really getting up there. I hope you're having a great day. I hope you're having a fantastic weekend. Thank you for joining me over on the Chi Ranger Vlog YouTube channel. Thank you for downloading the podcast from iTunes or by listening to it on ChiRanger.com. I am excited to have you with me this week as we have, I think, a pretty darn cool show. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into the news. And I want to talk about education and religion, because I thought Texas was bad with all the discussions a few years ago about removing evolution from textbooks and omitting key people from history and key events in history. The latest thing here in Korea is that some textbooks are set to remove certain aspects of evolution from the science portion. And some Koreans have classified this as the Christianization and falsification of education. And I have to agree. I've always asserted that both religion and science can peacefully coexist. And I mentioned that on the podcast a few weeks ago when we were talking about the algae life and how, and that's sorry, not the algae life, but the tree of life, the organism that had DNA from animals, from plants, and from primitive organisms. How that supports the Genesis story, how that supports science. But I really don't like it when people use their religious views to impose them in a classroom, in a public classroom. It's one thing that if you're attending a religious university, a religious charter school, or a parochial school, your curriculum can be focused as much or as little on religion as the organizers see fit. But in a public situation where there really is no state-imposed or state-sanctioned religion, I have a hard problem with this. Now, the specifics of this ban, this change in Korea, is they are altering two key factors. Number one, they're removing a diagram showing the evolution of horses, which is one of the best documented cases for evolution in the fossil record. And they are removing Archaeopteryx. Now, Archaeopteryx is the believed link between lizards, or reptiles, I should say, and birds. It's a lizard-like animal with wings and feathers. It's really believed to be the first avian on the planet. And I have to agree with that. It is the Christianization of education. It's bleeding into the scientific aspects of education. And that's wrong. In the United States, where I previously worked in education, as early as the early 90s when I was working for a university, I saw the students increasingly become less critical because of the way that education was being dumbed down. And one of the reasons why I came to Korea was because I love teaching. And I continuously was witnessing the educational system failing. And I think this is a huge failure. When you take established science, and even if you don't believe evolution is fact, that you subscribe that it is a theory, that it could be a flawed theory, but nonetheless it is a scientific theory. And you can teach the pros and the cons, the strengths and the weaknesses of that in a science classroom. But to just completely remove it because of religious reasons is just grossly irresponsible. And I really hope that this is reversed and that, again, I tell you, it makes me so angry. You know, when you look at schools in the United States and what they are and what they are not allowed to teach because someone somewhere may be offended. Now, as early as the 80s when I was going through school, when we got to the evolution area, parents were allowed to write permission slips to have their kids be excused from class because they didn't want them to be exposed to hearing the theory of evolution. Now, to me, that's ridiculous because it's a scientific theory. It's in a science classroom. That's the appropriate place to have that discussion, especially since most people use school as a quote-unquote free babysitter. It's ridiculous. So Korea, you really need to get on the ball and reestablish science in the science classroom. This is a bad move. On a cool move, Korea, the Haemu 430X has, crossed another milestone. It is now the fourth fastest train in the world. It reaches speeds of over 400 kilometers per hour. And when it goes into service, it'll actually be able to make the Seoul to Busan run in 90 minutes. And that's wicked fast. I mean, right now it takes about 2 hours and 45 minutes to go from Seoul Station to Busan Station. And this 430X, the Haemu 430X, is supposed to be able to do it in 90 minutes, blazing fast speeds, well over 100 kilometers faster than the current KTX trains. But the train's going to be shorter. I believe it only is going to have 8 cars instead of the 13, 14, 15 cars that the modern KTX has. So I don't know what that's going to mean for commuters or what that's going to mean for prices. But to have that kind of speed is awesome. Yeah, can't wait to see that. And the last story really is kind of recently. It's about North Korea and them, refurbishing their launch pad, restarting their nuclear program. And I have to say, I am not surprised. Time and time again, as we deal with issues from North Korea, I'm always just put off by the way that the West acts. You see, when the United Nations, the United States, whatever country talks to North Korea, they always say, please, don't do this. And that's the end of the discussion. They may use harsher languages, but let's be honest. They don't have anything to hurt North Korea with. North Korea wants to get attention. Every time they fall out of the news, they do something to get back in the news. The UN and other countries rattle their sabers and say, oh, North Korea, don't do this or we'll be mean to you. And they never are. North Korea really has not faced any consequences from any of their nuclear tests, from any of their launches. All it is empty promises, empty words from the rest of the world. And unless that changes, North Korea is never going to stop what they're doing, never going to relinquish the food stores to the mass population, never going to stop their nuclear program, never going to stop their space program, never going to tone down their military rhetoric. It's just empty words. And I wish that South Korea, I wish that the United States, the United Nations would really learn that if you're going to talk to North Korea, you have to put some strength behind the words. It's the same as if I was in a classroom and I tell my students, if you do this one more time, you're going to have such a consequence. And then when they do that thing another time and there's no consequence, then I'm at fault because I didn't follow through. That's what I see happening with the rest of the world as it pertains to North Korea. It's a shame too, because so much could be done to normalize relations, to correct the situation there, and they are missing an opportunity. They really are missing an opportunity. So there you have it. That is the news this week, and let's move on. It is time once more for the Content Rewind, and this week we have a couple stories. Number one, the LTE speed video on Tuesday, and that was a lot of fun. I have to say thank you very much to Ole KT for letting me borrow one of the Samsung Galaxy Notes to walk around Seoul and do some testing with. I have never, ever had a mobile phone that large before. Let me tell you, those things are huge. I'm used to having my iPhone and being able to stuff it in my pocket. Thankfully, when I was doing the video testing for that, I actually had my jacket on. I was able to slide it into a pocket. And even then, I was always worried about it falling out because it was only on loan to me, and I didn't have the opportunity to, I didn't want to break it and have to buy a new one because they ain't cheap here. A lot of people think that when you buy stuff from Korea because it's made here, it should be a lot cheaper. It isn't. It is freaking expensive to buy stuff here. And that's why a lot of times when we buy cameras or we buy other pieces of technology, it's a lot cheaper for us to go through B&H Photo or Adorama or eBay, whatever, in the United States, pay the tax on the import duties, and have it shipped here. I'll give you an example. Joe's 60D was $500 cheaper buying it in the United States than here in Korea. So even though we had it shipped and had to pay taxes on the import, we still save over $300. So, but I digress. The LTE speed, that was really, really cool. I've seen speed tests up to 50 megabits per second here in Korea, and around the world, the average for the LTE is about the same, about 20 to 24 megabits per second. A lot of the smaller undeveloped countries are getting 3G and LTE 3G speeds around a megabit per second. And I'm really happy to see people doing the test and seeing where things are. I remember a few years ago, there was that story in South Africa where they did the internet versus the homing pigeon, and the homing pigeon won. So as we get more and more infrastructure in place, we should see these speeds go up drastically around the world. After all, LTE and the upcoming LTE Advance are supposed to be able to have connections up to 300 megabits per second. I saw one person, it was in Europe, up north someplace. They said they had LTE speeds of about 60 megabits per second, maybe 80 megabits per second. That is freaking awesome. I wish I had that here, because I can't tell you how long I've been sitting there with my 3G wireless trying to upload a video to YouTube. Yeah, but it took me a while to go around different areas of Seoul to run tests, to compare things, and in general I got speeds about 24 megabits per second, and that's so much faster. That's almost equivalent to what I get with my iPhone when I do wireless in the house away from the router in this room. And it's pretty cool. The second video this week on Chi Ranger was of course the Yeosu review. Now, Kosis flew myself, Joe, and a few other bloggers down there for the opening weekend, and they asked me to do a video for them. So that's why I don't have a Yeosu video experience on my channel. I'm not sure when they're going to be uploading that over on their site. But I have to say, in general, I was really, really pleased with the expo. The opening weekend, we saw probably 35 to 40,000 people per day at the expo. And from what I see now, it's a lot more crowded. So I'm very thankful that we went when we did. And like I said in the video, I think you have to go there with the right mindset. Now that's very, very crowded, I hear that you can't really get to a lot of pavilions there. But I don't know. I mean, to me, it was always about the people, talking with the volunteers that were staffing the international pavilions, that were doing the performances. That was really the coolest part for me. The Big O show was fantastic. And I'm still really disappointed that the foreign language support wasn't as robust as I thought it would be, especially when you take into consideration the museums here in Seoul, how they have everything laid out. You go to Gyeongbok Palace and you watch the changing of the guard ceremony. Everything's in Chinese, Japanese, English, and Korean. You go to the National Museum of Korea, and everything is in multiple languages. You go to the War Memorial Museum, which is probably one of the best museums in Korea, and they have films about the war. And on the wall, there are 4 big buttons: Korean, English, Chinese, Japanese. So you can actually watch the same film dubbed in 4 different languages. Now, a lot of this you couldn't have done at the expo because the Big O show. There's no place for subtitles. I get that. I don't really care. But for some of the multimedia presentations in the expo, like the theme pavilion, which was some kind of fun show about a boy being trapped underneath the water with a seal rescuing him, showing the interrelationship between man and the sea and the animal life, that was all in Korean. And it should have been in Korea. I mean, this is Korea. It's the expo in Korea. The dialogue should have been in Korean. But off to the side, it would have been very helpful to have Chinese, English, and Japanese subtitles for the rest of the world to be able to participate in it. And that's my gripe. You go to Aqua Planet and the big aquarium, even though discussions were in Korean, all the displays of what animals were in each tank, that was in a multiple of different languages, and that's appropriate. So I just really wish that there was some, I guess, better displayed assistance to the international visitors, because that's what the expo is aiming to draw. People are really planning on having a lot of folks come in from around the world to this. And if you don't have the support there, they're not going to really be all that pleased with it. So, my review of the expo. On the Korea blog this past week, there was a little bit more techie type article written about LTE and the technology behind it and where it's going to go. That link, it will be in the show notes, so you can take a look at that if you're so inclined. But because of the workload, that's it for Content Rewind this week. It is time once more for the question of the week. And this week's question is, where do I like to stay when traveling? Now, this question was inspired by Facebook friend Elizabeth Sill and YouTuber Ozzy78. So, where do I like to stay? Well, I guess it really depends on what kind of travel experience, what kind of destination we're going to. I've stayed at hostels before while we've traveled, and many times that's actually probably one of the better places that we've gone to. When we went down to Jeju, we stayed in a guest house, which is the same as a hostel. And for a private room, it was the cheapest option. We had a great room. We had a great time meeting everyone at the hostel. So we try to do that when we can. But when we do stay at hostels, we really try to look at places that give us a private room. We're a married couple. We want to stay in a room to ourselves. When we were in Kalibo for the Atiatihan Festival, we stayed at the inn that was run by the local government unit. And the first night we stayed in the dormitory because that's all that was available. And then the rest of the stay, we were able to have our own private room. Let's see. Here in Seoul, we've reviewed, and in Busan, we've reviewed some hostels. But if we can get a private room, that's where we opt to go. So a lot of times when we go down to Busan, we'll stay in a love motel, because for a little bit more than what you would pay for at a hostel for a private room, we can get our own private room in a motel, called a love motel, a little amenities bag with some condoms and toothbrush, razors, and other goodies. But you get the flat screen television, you get the refrigerator, you get the coffee, you get the bathrobes, you get the jacuzzi tub, all of this in your room. So that's kind of what we look for. But at the other side, when we go to Sokcho, we stay at a guest house there for 30,000 won a night for a private room with its own bathtub and free breakfast. Upcoming next week, we are actually doing a few more hotel reviews here in Seoul. And these aren't cheap hotels. We're doing 2 5-star hotels. Great hotels, great amenities. So if you're staying in Seoul and you want to have a great experience with fantastic food, a fantastic bar in the center of the city with lots to see and do, these are places that you want to stay. It's like when we go to Las Vegas. We're going to Las Vegas for our summer vacation, or part of our summer vacation. And many times when we go there, we'll pick a hotel on the Strip. I went with Joe and her family for, it was the 2008 New Year, so ringing in 2009, and stayed at Mandalay Bay, right on the Strip. Fantastic hotel. In a few weeks later, we went back to Las Vegas to meet up with some friends in February to watch the Super Bowl, where my friend Bertrand Berry got to play and got a sack. Yes, they lost, but they got to play. And we stayed at the Motel 6 just off the Strip. In our upcoming trip, Joe found a fantastic Groupon at a resort just off the Strip, and we're staying there. But kind of what got me on this track of where to stay is I've actually written about this for the Korea blog. And in Korea, most of the time when we travel, we do try to do the love motels. We found those to be the best deals. When we went down to Andong for the Mask Festival, we found a great love motel, 25,000 won for a private room, night, television, Wi-Fi, refrigerator, water, the whole kit and caboodle. You can't beat it. $25. Ozzy 78 was doing I think he was visiting Mully and Tomoko down in Shizuoka, and he was staying in a Japanese capsule hotel, and for basically the size of a coffin, he was paying $30 for a night. And I thought that was quite expensive because of the amount of space you get, considering that a lot of times here in Korea, for anywhere between 30 and 50,000 won, $30 to $50, you can get a massive hotel room. In fact, we were up in Gangneung and stayed overnight in Gangneung for, I think it was $60. Our hotel room was bigger than our apartment. It was fantastic. We had, I want to say, a 70-inch LCD screen, a complete sauna, and not just like the steam sauna. This was a wooden enclosed deal in our bathroom that you could go in and chill out. It had a separate shower area and a 2-person jacuzzi bathtub for $60. In the United States, you'd be paying $200-300, maybe even more for the same kind of room. So we stayed all kinds of places. A lot of times, if we can, we would like to do either a minbak, which is kind of like the Korean version of a bed and breakfast here in Korea. We have done the jjimjilbang a couple of times, but I love to sleep on the floor. I can fall asleep anywhere. If you're lucky enough to get a mat or two, it's a little bit easier, but a lot of times in the jjimjilbang, you're in a communal space. So there is the snorage factor. So if you get someone who snores quite loudly, it's not a fun place to stay. So there you have it. That's where we like to stay when we're traveling. Really, it's all about the experience and what we can. Oh, one of my favorite places to stay. And when we went to Yosemite last summer, I made sure we got rooms there. And that is, of course, Curry Village. I love staying there. I love staying in the canvas tents. I love that rustic feeling. And that's not cheap either. When I first went there in 2006, I want to say it was $75 a night. Now it's, I believe, $120 a night. So it's not cheap, but it's a great experience. And that's what I'm hoping to convey with as we start to do more facility reviews, hotel, resort reviews. It's about creating the experience. So whether it is a hostel, whether it's a love motel, whether it's a homestay, a minbak, or a 5-star resort, everything has something special to offer. And part of what you get out of the experience is what you go into the experience and what you look to have while you're there. Because everything, essentially, if you're going to stay overnight someplace on a trip, you don't want to be spending your vacation in a room. You want to be spending your vacation having a great time. And so as long as you're safe and you're dry and you got a place to sleep, that's what I like. So I'm looking forward to the next 2 hotel reviews. I'm looking forward to doing some traveling this summer and finding out what we're doing. And speaking of that, this summer, we're actually staying in hostels or guest houses pretty much this entire summer while we're on the West Coast in Seattle and Portland. So again, it's about finding the right deal, finding the right experience, and just having fun. So that was a great question. Thank you very much for asking. If you have a question for me, you can tweet it to me at ChiRanger. You can email it to me at podcast@chiranger.com. You can leave it in the comment section down below. You can email me on YouTube. You can leave a comment over on the blog or on Facebook, and I'll be sure to answer it either straight away or in an upcoming podcast or video. Thank you very much, and let's move on. This week on Travel Talk, I am joined not by one, but by 2 filmmakers currently calling China their home. Dave Kellogg was previously working as a journalist before moving to China to help find the Qingdao American International School. His colleague, Brendan Mannon, was a city planner in Seattle before moving to China to join his friend. Together, they formed In Deep Films, a travel documentary company that primarily films in Asia. Gentlemen, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good to be here.
I was glad I was able to connect with you.
Yeah, it's kind of tough in China. Sometimes the internet's good, sometimes it's kind of bad.
Yeah. So you guys have a really diverse background, amazing professional careers. What made you choose to pull up stakes from the United States and go to China and start an international school?
It was Dave's idea, so I'm going to let him take it up on this one. Just basically, I think the best way to travel is actually to live abroad. And so I kind of had an idea to go to make a move to China, and then when you start thinking about something, a lot of times an opportunity will present itself in a surprising way. And so suddenly there was this opportunity to help open an international school in China, and it was like, that must be the answer for moving to China. And so I had to take it. And then Brendan, of course, I was working in my cubicle having a bad day, speed planning, and Dave called me and he's like, "Hey, I can't climb Mount Baker with you in 2 weeks because I'm moving to China." And it's sitting there, and immediately I was like, "What?" I was like, "I want to move to China. I'm going. Like 100%. I'm in. Tell me what I got to do." And turned out they needed a science teacher and somebody to help start the science curriculum at the school. So with my science background, I just fit right in. And before I knew it, a couple weeks later, I broke all my ties in the States and moved to China.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Now, since I've worked in Korea for a number of years, and previously in my career pathway, I worked for universities in the States, and each institution has its own ups and downs, its own challenges. What was your biggest challenge in starting an international school in China?
I would say just the cultural, just absolute, completely different mindset. Like, a lot of times you think that you're on the same page with, because the school was basically funded and basically managed from the Chinese side, and so it was just sometimes you think that you understand each other very, very clearly, and you think, and then a lot of times there's interesting surprises that now we're much more in tune with it, and it's not so big a deal. But when you first get here, a lot of times when you think something is one way, it's the exact opposite, and that takes time getting used to, for sure.
Absolutely. But let's talk about travel, since that's the focus of my podcast, and I think one of the things that you're probably most passionate about. And going back to 2010 and 11, the two of you hosted your own travel show for the Blue Ocean Network. Could you please share with my audience what that show was about?
Yeah, we actually had 3 different shows for Blue Ocean Network. The first one we did was called Take Me to China. There was this reality show that we put together where we ended up taking 2 friends, actually 4 friends, 2 Chinese people, a girl and a guy, and 2 foreigners, a girl and a guy, out to Xinjiang, which is a pretty remote place with very limited equipment, and we filmed 15-minute shows out there in Xinjiang, kind of reality-based travel experiential films. That was our first one, and then our second one we did with them was called China Driven, where we took a car and we drove around trying to find really remote places in China. And then the third one we did with them was called Exploring China, and that was more of a stand-up informational show for Blue Ocean Network.
Of the 3, what was your favorite to work on?
China Driven, I bet it's going to be. It's such a. Actually, this is the one thing about travel in China is having a car. It's actually extremely. Let's say it's difficult to get a driver's license in China, and you can't. They don't allow people to use international driver's license. You have to get it actually through China.
What makes it? Well, do you know why that they don't accept international licenses? Why they prefer the Chinese driver's license?
I think it's just, I think China's developing so fast and so quickly and stuff, and a lot of times their laws and stuff just aren't up to speed with international laws a lot of times. In some ways they are, but in other ways, they just have catching up to do, and it's just something that they haven't. I assume that at some point it's going to happen, but they just haven't done it yet.
Any challenges in studying for the Chinese driving exam?
Yes, indeed. It's funny because you can actually, one thing is you can take the Chinese driver's test in English, but the questions are incredible. It's the perfect example is of Chinglish. So you basically are a lot of times, it's like decoding abstract poetry. And so you're trying to understand what
the intent was.
Right. I think the best question, I wish I could put it in front of me right now, but it was essentially something like this. It was like, if you were driving and you fly off a bridge and land in water, this is a real question. What do you not do? And the choices are something like this. There's A, B, C, and D. A, roll up your window. B, undo your safety belt and put your head underneath the steering wheel. And C, put your head underneath the steering wheel. Or D, get a plastic bag and cover your head with it. And the answer was A. Yeah, what not to do. So don't roll up your window. But getting plastic bags out of the glove box
and putting it over your head is perfectly acceptable.
As you're going off the bridge and hitting the water. So you have time. So just make sure. So actually, this is what the thing is. Whenever we did China Driven, we always made sure that we had plastic bags in our glove box.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. Now, when you took the test, now I opted to switch over my driver's license from a U.S. license to a Korean license, which many people don't do here simply because they come to Korea for a year or two and they just bring over an international license. Right. Now, when I was going through it, I actually had the female staff behind the counter, cheering for me, ready, so excited that here's this foreigner in Korea taking the test. Did you have a similar experience?
Definitely get lots of stares.
Yeah,
when you're in there, people are just staring you down, jaws to the floor. What is Round Eye doing in here? Taking a driver's test, but it's actually, it's a huge. I mean, we took the test in Beijing, and so it's just actually a monster bureaucracy, like the DMV times, a billion. And so you just kind of go in there, and it's more just. You take the tests, you plug in your answers, you're really nervous because you're afraid to get that one question that was just like, the water question, basically. You're going to get how to answer it. But basically, you just go in there, you take the test, and it's very simple, and then they just hand you a license. They say,
good job.
China. And there are people out front, if you do not want to take the test yourself, you can pay them some money, and they can go in under your name, take the test for you. So
that's the entrepreneurial spirit. China isn't your only film focus. You've filmed in many other locations around the globe. I had an opportunity to see a couple of your films on the video portion of your website. What's been your most exciting film location?
For me, I would have to say skiing in Iraq. I mean, it's something that we were planning a whole bunch of different stuff to do for that trip, and it came down to us saying, "Can you ski in Iraq?" And I remember I had a big map in my classroom, and we were like, "It looks like there's snow there. I mean, there's like a little white spot, on Iraq. Maybe there's snow." And we Googled it, and we thought we saw some snow, and then just trying to figure out how to get into Iraq. Could we get into Iraq? What do we need? Are we going to get weird looks going in with long bags? Like, do they look like bazookas? And their skis, So I think that was the hardest and the most exciting too.
Oh, cool. Now, you've mentioned several times about focusing on some out-of-the-way places, some interesting places to go. Is there one kind of dream story, something very unique that's on your bucket list that you'd like to tell?
We actually had one. We were trying to get it, and it fell through for the time being. We really wanted to do basically a show called Arab Spring Break, and so we would essentially go to Egypt, Libya, and Tunisia, and travel through there. And Egypt and Tunisia were no problem, but we think it's a really interesting story to tell over there. But then the other one that was a challenge was Libya, and they're making it. It's been extremely difficult to get visas to go into that country. We actually pulled a lot. We have quite a few resources to contact people, but it was just at the time it was impossible. And we still might do it if we can, but the country was so the government was so new that they couldn't handle. We could have tried to just slip in through the border or something like that, but that's generally not encouraged, of course. And
of
so
course.
We tried to pull every resource we could to get it, and basically we got farther than I think most people did. You can read the Lonely Planet Thorn Tree or whatever. You can read those forums and stuff. We got farther than most people did, but we finally got the answer. It was just like, the government just can't handle this right now. So we had to cancel the trip. We were really eager to do it, actually.
Yeah. Well, hopefully as things settle down there, you'll be able to return and get that project underway.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, cool. Well, I always end these interviews with 3 questions, 3 a little bit random questions focused on travel, and they're designed to get your gut response. So don't think too much about the answers. Are you guys ready for these questions?
Hit me.
All right. Question number 1. If someone were to tap you on the shoulder right now and offer to fly you anywhere around the globe, where would you guys go?
I would say Egypt, just because we talked about it. And again, I think doing a trip like that, it would really open up people's minds. And especially, it seems like when we go to these places, like we've gone to Iraq, we've gone to Iran, we've gone to Kashmir. And I think one of the reasons we like to travel to these places is to show people that what's going on there is people just living their lives. And no matter what's happening with the governments, you're going to meet awesome people. You're going to meet people who try to rip you off. You're going to you're going to have amazing meals. You're going to have the best times of your lives in all of these places. And it's just getting out there and going to these places that people that get a negative image in the news, and showing people that, it's just people living their lives.
Right on.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, question number 2. What is the earliest travel-related memory that you have?
I would answer with my parents in Utah, looking at visiting like the dinosaur parks out there.
Oh, yeah, those are great.
Yeah, incredible. Yeah. And I remember, I think my question I didn't understand was like they were extinct, and I didn't understand why the dinosaurs smelled so bad. For me, it was another cross country trip with my parents, going from Washington D.C. to Seattle, and stopping everywhere in between, and punching my brother in the back seat, and
It seemed like a long trip then, but it was 2 weeks, and definitely one of the best trips of my life.
Oh, very cool, very cool. All right, and the third question, the final question is, if someone were to come out and visit your neck of the woods, what is something that they should see or do while visiting your area?
Qingdao. Definitely, I would think beer in a bag.
Beer in a bag. Weightlifting on the beach with some big Chinese guys.
With a beer in a bag.
Yeah.
So basically what you could do is I would say if let's say you had just 1 hour to have the experience, I would be like, go down to beach number 1, which is like the most crowded beach in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Go buy a Speedo. A very tight Speedo, by the way. Little butt crack there. And throw that guy on, and you can join right in with the locals. And then get a bag of beer, lift some weights right on the beach. A year membership is about for that gym is about $6.
Oh wow!
And you might have to wash your hands. You can just wash your hands in the ocean. The weights are a little rusty, but other than that, and then just enjoy your beer with a straw and get strong.
There's actually a great video. There's a really good traveler named Mike Murphy. He does lots of travel videos, and he did one where he came out and visited us. And if you want to see the real Qingdao experience, check out his video. It's on Trip Films.
Okay.
And if you search Qingdao, Mike Murphy, you'll find it.
Yeah.
It's a quintessential Qingdao travel guide.
It basically gives you that question, answers that question. He basically answers it directly.
All right, very cool. I'll have to check that one out. Thank you, gentlemen, so much. My guests today have been Dave Kellogg and Brendan Madden. You can keep up with their adventures by visiting them on the web at indeepfilms.com. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you very much.
Hey, that was a lot of fun. Thank you. Well, look at this. It is time to end the podcast. Another week done. It was awesome. I had a lot of fun. I love talking to those guys out in China. They got some fun stories, some interesting answers there. If you know of someone that would like the podcast, please share with them the links. I would really appreciate it. If you have a question or feedback, please send it to me. I am looking forward to improving the quality and making a few changes when I come back from vacation for season number 3. So I'm in the planning stages now. So if you have some ideas of what you'd like to see in the podcast, what you would like to see expanded or reduced or eliminated or swapped out, please let me know. But until next time, may the road always rise to meet your feet. May the wind be always at your back. And may you have an absolutely fantastic day. I'll talk to you soon.